What's so nice?
We are doing escrow instructions, I believe, if that's what we,
Yes, sir.
if that's what we had announced. Okay, we're gonna get rolling, and basically we will finish this class today. We're gonna do probably a little less than 2 hours, but I think that'll give us plenty of time to kind of go through the program. First of all, there's a couple of different ways that generally escrow is going to prepare escrow instructions. Okay. Matter of fact, let's start over here a little bit. We've kind of gone through the progression in these classes of contracts. Hey, Johnny's here.
Hello.
Johnny, everybody, Johnny. Johnny, Michael, and Debbie. Let me have a few other folks. But welcome to our class. Okay, so the progression of the training that we've been doing is kind of leads us in this order. We've done listing agreements, we've done contracts, we've done listing presentations, we've gone through this. Last week we did offer negotiations, so let's pretend we negotiated an offer successfully, and now we're getting to the next step in the process, which would be opening an escrow. This is a set of old escrow instructions. Escrow instructions, you'll find as you get more experience in this business, tend to look very, very similar. In fact, I just wanted to skim through these to make sure this is the copy that I thought I had, and it is. So basically, you're going to find two different types of escrow instructions. They basically achieve the exact same thing, but you'll find some escrow companies that use basically the residential purchase agreement, which, because by the way, the name of our contract today is Residential Purchase Agreement and Joint Escrow Instructions. Okay? It hasn't always been that way. It never used to be Residential Purchase Agreement and Joint Escrow Instructions. It was just, actually what it used to say is Residential Purchase Agreement and Receipt for Deposit, which was basically literally a receipt for the earnest money deposit that you were getting. But at any rate, the whole concept of changing the title of the contract was to memorialize in the contract what the escrow instructions are. Keeping in mind, the escrow instructions are just that. They are instructions to the escrow company, and they are to instruct the escrow, neutral, third party, buyer, seller, escrow in between them, neutral. I receive money from one party, I hold it in trust. I receive documents, maybe money, but normally it's documents from the other party, in this case would be the seller, hold them in trust. What do you normally receive from the buyer? Money. Okay? Buyer gives you a deposit, gives you thousands of dollars. Maybe it's a cash deal, they give you hundreds of thousands of dollars. Or there's a down payment of 20% and then the loan comes in. All of that money is held in a trust for hopefully the successful purchase of the property. What does the seller normally give you? Most of the time they're not giving you money. They're giving you documents. Okay, the most important document that the escrow holds in trust is the grant deed. Okay? When you get a set of escrow instructions, one of the items in those escrow instructions for the seller to execute is a grant deed. If you've never sold a piece of property before, and whether you're an agent or whether you're a seller for that matter, can that be a little concerning? Well, wait a minute. We signed the contract yesterday. I'm now opening escrow today. My agent is asking me to sign my escrow instructions. Escrow instructions, to oversimplify them, escrow instructions are basically just a mirror image of the terms and conditions in the contract. Okay? When are we going to close escrow? What's the purchase price? Are there any inspection periods? Is someone buying a home warranty? Whatever it happens to be. It's just a mirror image of what's going on within the contract. But in addition to that package, what does the seller get to sign? And maybe we're 30, 60, 90 days away from close of escrow. The seller is asked to sign a grant deed. What does the grant deed say? And they do, by the way, they do it in front of a notary, which may be you, maybe one of the agents. It says, I, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, hereby grant my property to Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, signed, notarized, done. Can that be a little scary? Wait a minute, we haven't closed escrow yet. You just asked me today to sign my property over to these people. Are there thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of grant deeds that have been signed by sellers, signing their property over to buyers, and those escrows fell out? Absolutely. Let's get back to escrow's role. Escrow takes that document from the seller and does what? Holds it in trust. Holds it in trust until such time as the terms and conditions of the escrow instructions have been met. All of them have been met. The loan is now ready to fund. It's ready to close. Now I've got all the buyer's money over here. I have the seller's documents, and in this particular case, a grant deed. Okay? And what do? We kind of exchange things, right? You know, hey, in exchange for this money, which some of or all of is going to go over to the seller, I'm going to give you a piece of paper. And that piece of paper says, you know, in the home in the form of a grant deed. Which is also interesting, because does the buyer immediately get that piece of paper? No. There's a lot of trust going on with this thing. Buyer doesn't actually get that piece of paper right away. When do they get that piece of paper that says they own the house? So 3, 4, 5 weeks later. And it doesn't come from the agents, and it doesn't come from escrow. It comes from county recorder's office. After that deed is recorded, the county recorder sits back and says, who do I send this deed, recorded deed to? Ah, Mr. and Mrs. Portugal. They just bought the house. Let's mail it over to this address. So you bought the house 4 or 5 weeks ago, and now you open up your mail one day. Ah, got this piece of paper. It says I own the house. Pretty important piece of paper. So at any rate, part of escrow's job, again, independent, third party, neutral, hold money and documents in trust for the buyer, hold in some cases money and documents in trust for the seller, but just to boil it down and more simply, let's get the buyer's money, let's get the seller's grant deed, let's satisfy the terms and conditions of the escrow instructions. When all of those terms and conditions have been satisfied, now we close escrow, money gets shifted to where the appropriate people, and title gets delivered. Okay. So, at any rate, a couple different ways to do escrow instructions. These are an old set of escrow instructions, but it doesn't matter. They're all basically the same. Some escrow companies use the RPA, Residential Purchase Agreement, and we're going to look at an example. This is not that example, but some of them use the actual RPA, and they just put a cover letter on top of it. And the cover letter says, we are the escrow holder, and please refer to the Residential Purchase Agreement for terms and conditions of the escrow, and we will act accordingly based upon the terms and conditions of the escrow, or excuse me, of the contract. Okay? Other escrow companies, like this first set of escrow instructions that we're going to look at, to be honest with you, they don't trust us as professional real estate practitioners to fill out a contract that's worth a darn. And because they've seen so many contracts that are poorly written, illegible, terms are undefined, escrow has said, we can't trust you guys to do escrow instructions. You can't even write the contract. And what is important, extremely important for an escrow company, is to have extreme clarity on what the terms and conditions are. Because who are they? In many ways, they're almost like the judge or the arbitrator. In theory, though, there should be nothing to judge and nothing to arbitrate. It just should be a set of facts. But if we as agents, which happens far too often, I would suggest it happens more often than not, we write contracts that are not clear. Then you give that contract to the escrow, and that's when we get to discover on day 2 or day 3 of our escrow that, ooh, we've made a mistake. I thought this was the term, you thought this was the term, and that's when you get that call from escrow that says, who's paying for the termite? Because I need to know, because it's part of the escrow instructions. Who's paying for the home warranty? What did you mean in paragraph 2.3.6.7, or whatever it happens to be? Because I, as the escrow officer, don't understand what buyer and seller have agreed to. Or more, what they're really saying is, I don't understand what you two agents tried to accomplish here, because it's not clear. So you run into some problems. So with that in mind, what a lot of escrow companies do, still to this day, is they basically redraft the contract. They take the pertinent points out of the contract, and they draft them. So rule number 1 of this class, we're already 10 minutes into it, and I can't believe I haven't said this already. The most important thing you need to do with your escrow instructions is read them. Okay? Read them. Make sure that what your escrow instructions say is what your contract says, especially if you're dealing with an escrow company that basically types them over again. And you're going to see what I'm talking about. So let's take a look at this set. I'm just going to kind of go through line by line. You always get this Privacy Act basically talks about, by the way, there's a lot of boilerplate language. It doesn't matter what escrow company you get here. Talking about privacy. Escrow is basically letting all the parties know that they're going to get in touch with some sensitive information. They're going to have social security numbers, they're going to have all sorts of sensitive stuff. So they're just telling everybody on record that, hey, we are subject to the Privacy Act. We can't just start giving your information out willy-nilly. We can't sell your information to a company for a moving company or storage company. We certainly can't steal your identity because we have a lot of information that they could steal their identity. So there's all sorts of things in here. It tells them about what they collect. We collect public, personal information about you from the following sources. Okay, they're going to get stuff. Information from you in letters, other communications, escrow instructions, statement of identity. We're going to talk about that. Statement of identity is also normally referred to as statement of information. On a statement of information, which by the way is a one-page form, every single escrow that you will ever do in your life, the buyer and the seller will fill out a statement of information. And it is exactly what it says. Give us information. Who are you? Where do you live? Where have you lived for the last 10 years? Give me the addresses. Give me the dates. When did you move in? When did you move out? Where do you work? Give me the addresses. How long have you worked there? Are you married? If not, fine. If so, to who? Give us information. Are you divorced? If so, when? Where? Yes, I'm divorced 5 years ago, Dallas, Texas. Okay? They want to know a lot of personal information. You will have buyers. Anybody in the room had problems with buyers or sellers? I don't want to fill this out. Okay, you will. You will have buyers or sellers. I'm not giving you this information. Well, guess what? You better give them the information. And by the way, escrow really doesn't want this. Escrow kind of fits hand in glove with the title companies. Escrow and title work very, very closely. One of the reasons that you have the collection of this type of information is, and this is not just buyer, this is buyer and seller provide this information. Okay? If something pops up on a title report, preliminary title report, or if something pops up in relation to the buyer's ability to pay child support liens, stuff like that, it's like, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, Mr. Buyer, you have a child support lien in Inyo County dating back to this particular date and time. It appears as though you owe your spouse, Mrs. Jones, X amount of bucks. Well, in part, what they want to do when that stuff pops up, they want to go back to that statement of information. And they want to see, is there an ex Mrs. Jones? Did you live up in Bakersfield? Do you even have any kids? I mean, does this sort of stuff make sense? Okay? And of course, they're just trying to do a preliminary. If something pops up, let's take a quick look at the statement of information to see, is it even possible that this person could have a child support lien? He's never been married, he's single, and he's only 20 years old, and according to the information, the child support lien has been going on for 12 years. Okay, well, that doesn't make sense. Okay? The guys, what do you have, the kid when he was 8 years old? So, at any rate, but they gather a lot of different information. We'll talk a little bit more about the statement of information later. Also, we get information from third parties, including real estate agents, brokers, mortgage companies, lenders, title companies, contractors, bookkeepers. A lot of information. Homeowners Association. Homeowners Association may send information in on the seller. Insurance agent. Has there been any liens, any claims made against the property in the last few years? What were they for? Why? So all sorts of stuff comes in. Is it possible that an escrow company can get information on tax liens that an individual owes? Again, I already mentioned child support liens. Yeah. I've had sellers that are flabbergasted. We're trying to sell a house, and then they get a phone call from me that says, hey, guess what? Our escrow is going to be delayed because you have a child support lien. What's that got to do with me selling my house? Well, according to the governing bodies, it has a lot to do with you selling your house. And it's not just a matter of, are you going to get proceeds and they want to attach them. It's a matter of, you can't close escrow until that lien is dealt with. And guess who has to bless the closing of that escrow? The district attorney in the county, wherever the child support lien is in place. Okay? Doesn't matter. Let's suppose the child support lien is for $5,000 and the seller's selling the house and getting no money. It's a short sale. There's no money coming out to the seller. Or let's pretend that the seller's getting $300,000. Okay? Doesn't matter. You take your pick. Child support liens for $5,000. You cannot close that escrow until the DA in that county says you can close it. And are we going to release the lien and let the escrow close, or are they going to demand money? Wait a minute, there is no money. It's a short sale. Okay, fine. They probably aren't going to demand money, but they still have to release the property to close escrow. There's $300,000 in there. So the seller says, it's okay, just pay the $5,000 off. I don't care. Well, guess what? That's fine, but it's just like any other demand. Now you've got to go to the agency and say, is it really $5,000 or is it now $5,272.52? So all of these things are in place. So tax liens, IRS liens, all of this. So anyway, information comes from a lot of places. Categories of parties to whom escrow holder will disclose. We may disclose non-public personal information about you to the following types of parties. Okay? Your lender, title insurance company, mortgage company, lenders, insurance agents, and companies associated with your escrow transaction. Well, I don't want that information out. It's going to be kind of tough. Title company needs to know. If you're not going to share their information with the title company, we can't close. Your lender needs to know. Non-financial companies such as homeowners association, attorneys, bookkeepers, accountants, federal, state, tax auditor. So again, some of this information does go to the appropriate people who would need to know in order to get your escrow closed. We're on C. Service providers, contractors, pest control operators, other rendering services. Now again, they're not going to necessarily give, they're not going to give the seller's social security number to the termite guy. But they very well may give a forwarding address, or they very well may give some other type of information that's pertinent to whatever the termite guy is. So at any rate, we've got a whole bunch of information here, and everybody, of course, is concerned about identity theft. Okay? I will tell you my personal experience, and I don't know of any identity theft cases that have revolved around an escrow company losing or selling or fraudulently giving out information to the wrong parties. I'm sure it's probably happened, but I don't know it. So you're always going to get that, which, by the way, one of the reasons we're going to go through this line by line, paragraph by paragraph, is you should, best practice is for you to sit down with your buyer or with your seller and go through this. Okay? And by the way, this process is much easier if you've sat down with your buyer and or your seller and thoroughly explained the purchase contract. If you haven't fully explained the purchase contract, well, shame on you, number one. But this process gets a lot more complicated. Or you do what so many agents do, is say, here's the contract, sign it, send it back in. Here's the escrow instructions, sign it, send it back in. You haven't reviewed any of it with anybody, and you just pray everything works. Not only is that not best practice, that's not upholding your fiduciary duty to your buyer or seller. Okay, so page 1 talks about personal information, what we can and cannot do about it, or do with it. Page 2, this is fairly common. By the way, you'll notice a lot of escrow instructions are formatted in a very similar fashion. Okay? Now, this is a set of escrow instructions that has taken the contract, okay, and they basically retyped the terms and conditions that have been negotiated between buyer and seller and their respective agents, and they're retyping them. Okay? So this is what they've done. They've gone to the contract, and they've said, we've got a $2,000 deposit. Well, it's pretty straightforward. Does the deposit say it's $2,000? Initial deposit $2,000. Prior to close of escrow, buyer will deposit an additional amount of $18,000. Well, that's what the contract says. So what is the deposit and basically the down payment for this particular transaction is how much? 20 grand. If you sat through our offer class several months ago, we used our bad offer. Remember, it had, I think, a $2,000 earnest money and a $50,000 increased deposit. Let's just suppose for a minute that that wasn't caught by the buyer or the seller or their agents. What would we have over here? We would have, $2,000 is to be deposited today, An additional $50,000 is to be deposited at some point, which wasn't clarified, which would have done what? That would have prompted a call to the agents from who? The escrow officer saying, your contract, is this a $52,000 deposit? And it says $2,000 you've given me, and it says $50,000 is coming, but it doesn't say when. So your escrow officer would say, when am I getting the extra $50,000 earnest money deposit? And then you would say, did I miss something? Okay, but again, let's just deal with the facts that we've got here. So we've got our $2,000 deposit, we've got our $18,000 initial. Now this is not deposit, by the way, the $18,000. Balance of funds needed. Having said that, does that balance of funds include closing costs? Doesn't say that anywhere. Doesn't say that anywhere. So is it possible that if a seller, or in this case a buyer, is it possible you've drafted a contract and I've sat down and I've said, hey Johnny, this is the deal. Down payment's going to be $20,000. So don't forget closing costs. You're going to need another $6,000 in closing costs. To me, it's clear as clear could be. You need $26,000. Okay? Now you get a set of escrow instructions. I haven't sat down and reviewed them with you at all. You look over here, and what does it say?
20 grand.
It says, hey honey, we need $2,000, and then prior to close of escrow, we need to deposit an additional 18. I thought I heard Lance say something about something else, but look, 20 grand.
60 grand.
All I need is 20 grand. Okay? Happens all the time. Okay. Buyer herein to obtain a new first loan in the amount of $340. Now again, where is escrow getting this information from? Purchase contract. If you're just guessing on what the loan amount is, you've guessed wrong on the contract. The escrow instructions have now taken your wrong guess and memorialized it even further in additional documents. Who normally is going to determine what the loan amount is going to be? Lender. So you better make sure you have some communication with your lender, not only to make sure that you've got the down payment correct, but you also have the proper loan amount. Now these things get fixed all the time. And they get fixed in the form of amendments. Oh no, the loan amount is not $340,000. The loan amount is $332,000. And you need to put 20% down instead of what this is 15 or whatever you're looking at, whatever it is. Do those issues cause heartburn for transactions and buyers and sellers? They do. We don't want surprises. We want all that stuff to be clarified up front. So, but hey, this came off the contract, so let's just assume it's correct. Total consideration, that's another word for our sales price, $360,000. Okay? Okay, here we go. We will deliver to you any instruments which this escrow requires. By the way, who is we? Buyer and sellers. That's who's going to sign this. If it's a single person, it's I. If it's husband and wife or multiple, it's we. Okay? So we're in writing. I will deliver to you any instruments which this escrow requires, fully executed, signed, all of which are instructed to use, provided that on or before May 6, 2005, this is an old set of instructions, it doesn't matter, they haven't changed, you will hold a policy of title insurance issued by the company that we want to issue title insurance, in this case is Commonwealth Land Title, which doesn't exist anymore, with the liability of $360,000 covering the property. Okay? So, if before May 6th, I have a title insurance policy insuring the property for what? The purchase price amount. I'm going to give you all this information. What is May 6th, by the way? It's a closing date.
Closing date.
Okay? That's going to be a closing date. Okay? Which, by the way, is why I don't like 30 days from now, 45 days from now. Not only is closing dates, remember we talked about this in the contract class, subject to the interpretation of the buyer and seller, 30 days from acceptance. Well, when did we accept it? I think we accepted that on Tuesday the 5th, but I see a date over here that says it was written on the 3rd, and then I see there's a counteroffer here on the 4th. when did the thing actually get accepted? I don't know. Let's start counting from that day. That's good because that falls on a Friday, and we can get our moving van. Okay, now you've got buyers and sellers having that, and then now you've got an escrow officer thinking the same thing. When did you ultimately get final acceptance? So what does the escrow officer do? Ring, ring, Johnny. When were you guys thinking about closing this? It says 30 days. If I count that out exactly, it's Monday, April, whatever. Is that what you wanted to do? Oh no, that's a Monday. We were expecting on closing the prior Friday. Okay. Well, is that what the seller was thinking as well? Is that what everybody was? That's why I don't like writing, those dates. Give me a date. So anyway, so here's our date. Legal description is attached. Exhibit A. What are we legally describing? Describing the property. Okay. We're describing the property. So here we are. Legal description attached. And this Exhibit A is normally the legal, the meets and bounds description. Lot 6, tract 272, book number 25, as recorded in the Riverside County Recorder's Office on April 10th of 1945, yada, yada, yada. Okay, that's the type of stuff. Or if you're a really goofy one, the one for real estate licensing school, the northeast corner of Mr. Jones's oak tree to 200 paces left to the big boulder with the cross on top of it, that sort of stuff. Okay, and you see those every now and then. Okay, so this is what we're going to get now, better known as 15960 Nina Avenue in Maria Valley. Title policy shall be vested in Humberto Pineda. Who is that? Buyer or seller?
Buyer.
Buyer. That is the buyer. Title policy. Who do we need to ensure that the property is has clean title? The buyer. Okay. So it's going to be invested in the buyer's name or multiple buyers' names. Okay, free from encumbrances. So in other words, we're going to give Mr. Pineda a title insurance policy that says the property is free from encumbrances, meaning what? The seller's baggage, seller's loans, a lien from his brother, a mechanic's lien because he didn't pay off the guy who did the back room addition, all that sort of stuff. Free from encumbrances, except there are going to be some encumbrances. And what are they going to be? General and special taxes. Always going to have the taxes. Now that doesn't mean that the buyer is assuming unpaid taxes, but your property, it has a perpetual tax lien on it, forever. Okay? Even if you were to pay your taxes for 10 years in advance, you would still have a tax lien on your property. Okay? I think. Anyway, you're always going to have a tax lien on your property.
Right.
Okay? Death and taxes. You're always going to have a tax lien on your property. Okay, so here you go. So you're going to get free and clear title except any tax liens. That's very normal. Sometimes buyers freak out about that. You need to be prepared to explain to them, oh, this does not mean Mr. or Mrs. Pineda, or Mr. Pineda. This does not mean that you're inheriting the unpaid taxes from the seller. Those will be prorated per our contract, per our escrow instructions when we get farther down on the page. But you will see that there is going to be subject to property tax. You need to be prepared to explain that to them. What else is not going to be free and clear from encumbrances? Well, you're also going to have, if any, covenants, conditions, restrictions, what the CC&Rs, which could indicate a homeowners association, but not always. Doesn't always mean that there's a homeowners association. It means that it could be association. I wouldn't say it's 50-50. I wouldn't say it's 90-10 either way. Depends on what city and state and neighborhood you're in. Some properties have CC&Rs on everything, but there's no associations. And other parts of Orange County, especially the newer stuff, everything in it is an association over there, which means you're also going to have your CC&Rs. Reservations, rights of way. These would be like easements. Okay, if there's an easement on there, if there's an easement, there's an easement. It is what it is. Edison has easements on everything. Utility district, water company, gas company, phone company. I mean, you just have easements. Could be an easement maybe for the neighbor, an old driveway going up the path, whatever it happens to be. Oil, mineral, gas restrictions, if any. which on most of the stuff we're going to sell for our real estate career, there are no oil, mineral, or gas rights. Those have all been gone years ago. Or they may be there, but you don't own them. Okay? I don't own the mineral rights underneath my house. I just don't. Even if I was to buy an old house, 20-acre ranch out in the middle of the hills, normally that thing had been sold over years and years and years. Those mineral rights have been reserved for somebody else 100 years ago. Whether they ever used them or not is a whole other story. But normally you're not going to get that. Okay, what else do we got? A first trust deed. Now remember, what are we getting? We're getting free and clear title, free from encumbrances, except for taxes, CC&Rs. But wait a minute, what's this? We're going to get a deed of trust securing $340,000. What is that? That is Mr. Pineda's new loan. Okay? So those numbers should jive. If it says up here he's getting a loan for $340,000, it should say down here that he's getting a loan for $340,000. Those go together. Okay? And his title insurance is going to accept that, because at close of escrow, what are they going to do? They're going to record a deed of trust that says this guy borrowed $340,000 from ABC Mortgage Company, right? Okay, so now we get into instructions. And by the way, so far, everything we've talked about has been pulled off of the contract. What if Mr. Pineda's name is spelled wrong? He's not Umberto, he's Roberto. He's not Umberto Pineda, he's Roberto Pineda Jr. He's not Roberto Pineda, he's Roberto Salcido Pena. Or S. Pena. Do those things make differences?
Yes.
Do they cause you problems? Can they be fixed? Yes. Do they cause problems later? Yes. So make sure you get it straight. Okay, so here's our escrow instructions. Finance, this escrow. Now again, this also is dependent upon what your purchase contract says. Is your purchase contract subject to the buyer obtaining financing, qualifying and getting a loan? If it is, then you need to have this language in here. This escrow is subject and contingent upon buyer and property qualifying for and buyer obtaining new conventional first trust deed loan as evidenced by the following described trust deed. And here's a description of what they're looking for. Blue Point Financial, yada, 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 $340,000. Now, what if you thought, let's say you're the listing agent, and what you told the seller was that it was not contingent upon financing? Is this inconsistent? It's inconsistent, because this says it's contingent upon financing. In other words, if Mr. Pineda cannot get a loan, Mr. Pineda walks away from the deal, gets his $2,000 back, and says, thank you very much. If your understanding is different, then you better clarify. Why do the escrow instructions say it's contingent upon him getting a loan? I thought our contract and all of my discussions were that it wasn't contingent upon that. What did I miss? Why is my... Or maybe escrow misread it, which happens all the time. It's another reason why you have to read these things. Escrows, they're fallible just like we are. They made a mistake. Okay, they got the wrong language in here. Okay, so this is telling escrow. Now again, remember, these are instructions to be signed by seller and by buyer, instructing escrow on what to do. So one of escrow's instructions currently is this guy has to be able to obtain a loan from Blue Point. If he can't get a loan from Blue Point, escrow cannot unilaterally just go to the buyer and say, can you come up with cash? You got to close this escrow, we need cash. Buyer says, well, no, it says I needed to get a loan from Blue Point, and they're not giving it to me because it's contingent. It's contingent upon that, and they wouldn't give it to me. All bets are off. Okay? What else is this? What other instructions do we have? Insurance. Buyer will furnish escrow a new fire insurance policy in the amount acceptable to the lender. Who's the lender? Blue Point.
Blue Point.
Escrow holder is authorized to pay the first year's premium for same unless a paid receipt is deposited in escrow. So what is escrow instructed to do? I have to get an insurance policy from the buyer, naming Blue Point, in an amount acceptable to Blue Point. If I don't get it, I can't close. And if I do get it, I either have to have a receipt that says you've paid for it, or I need money. Escrow holder is authorized to pay first year's premium. We only have $20,000 in there. That's for down payment. Where is escrow going to get the money to pay for the first year of insurance premium? Where's it coming from?
Closing costs?
Closing costs to be paid by who?
The buyer.
Well, it could be by, we don't know yet because we haven't gotten that far, but they got to be paid by somebody. So if the contract says that the buyer's only putting down their $20,000 and all closing costs are being paid by the seller or somebody else, then we're okay. But that needs to be outlined because right now it says escrow holder has to pay for it. So we better figure out where those funds are coming from. And maybe we'll find out in a minute, maybe we won't. Okay, so they got to get an insurance. Closing costs. Regardless of any printed matter to the contrary herein. So in other words, if I make a mistake somewhere else, doesn't matter. What it says in this paragraph rules. In addition to the seller paying their customary closing costs, I love that. What's that? What is the customary closing costs? It's what's customary. Well, what's customary? I don't know, Northern California, this is customary. Southern California, that's customary. My seller's from out of state. What's customary in the state he's coming from may not be customary to where we're at. I don't know.
That's ambiguous.
Yeah, you think? Let's leave that aside for a minute. In addition to the seller paying their customary closing costs, seller agrees to pay a portion of the buyer's recurring and non-recurring closing costs. Let's stop right there. What is a recurring closing cost?
Taxes,
Taxes,
insurance.
insurance. Look at you, new kid in the class, busting out the answers. That's close enough. Taxes, insurance, maybe a homeowners association dues. Recurring, just think of what does the word mean? It's going to reoccur month after month, year after year. Okay. So what we have here is escrow, and again, this language should be coming from the purchase contract. So the escrow says, based upon their interpretation of the contract, that the seller agrees to pay, it doesn't say all, it says a portion, of the buyer's recurring, taxes, insurance, HOA, whatever it happens to be, and non-recurring closing costs. What is a non-recurring closing cost? It only happens once, it occurs once, and then it stops. So that would be things like
Recording fees.
recording fees,
Title policy.
title policy, escrow fee. Okay. Anything that the buyer only has to pay for one time is a non-recurring closing cost. So, the seller's agreed to pay $4,000, is not agreed to pay $4,000. Seller has agreed to pay an amount not to exceed. You see how that's in bold capital letters? Does that mean that the seller could possibly pay less than $4,000?
Yeah.
Could that be a problem later on? It could be if everyone's not understanding what that means. So, in this case, the seller's not to exceed $4,000. Cost to the buyer for recurring or non-recurring closing costs, not to exceed $4,000. Said closing costs include, but are not limited to. I love this. I like to write that type of language in my contracts because I want to give everybody an understanding that it could include some things, but there could be other things. Recording fees, title insurance, you guys write ahead. Escrow fees, loan fees, yada, yada, yada. Credit report fee, appraisal fee. So it could include those things, but it also could include some other things, because otherwise we'd have, we'd have 500-page escrow instructions. Okay, so we got the seller paying $4,000, up to $4,000 of the buyer's recurring, non-recurring closing costs. Seller initials, buyer's initials. Here we go to page 2. Additional instructions. Again, they're talking about more fees. At close of escrow holder is hereby instructed and directed to charge seller's account with buyer's recurring and non-recurring closing not to exceed $4,000 and is to charge buyer's account with all closing costs in excess of $4,000. A little bit repetitive, but they're just going on record saying, again, seller is going to get charged for up to $4,000. Anything above that, the buyer is going to get charged with. Now again, you've got to sit down with the buyer. Hey, remember that $20,000, the $2,000, and the $18,000? Remember we talked about $4,000 that the seller is going to pay? This tells you right now that there could be more. Have we talked to the lender? Has the lender given us a good faith estimate? Good faith estimate. It's required by law. You take a loan application with the lender, they have to give you a good faith estimate. That tells you what your loan amount is, what your interest rate that they're quoting for you, how much your down payment is going to be, how much your closing costs are going to be, total funds necessary to close. And then again, now, okay, what's necessary? We've got $4,000 worth of a credit. All right. Now another thing you got to remember is sometimes, depending on the type of loan you're getting, there are certain things that the lender will not allow the seller to pay on behalf of the buyer. So you got to be careful with that. So when you say, hey, we're going to ask the seller to pay $4,000 in closing costs, that is not a conversation that happens in a vacuum. That is not just something that you just sit down willy-nilly and sit down with the buyer. Who do we need to talk to? Who do we need to talk to about that? The lender. Hey, the seller, looks like we're going to ask the seller to pay $4,000 on this purchase. This is the type of loan they're doing. Does that help? Can we do that? Can you use that? Will that offset? And by the way, when I say does that help, who am I asking? Who should that help? There's only one person that this should be helping. The buyer. Is it beneficial for us to write this offer asking the seller to pay $4,000 of closing costs? And is it beneficial to my buyer? Because sometimes you'll get closing costs paid, and what do you have? You get the lender saying, alright, they just gave me 4 G's. Okay? Right? Discount points, loan origination fees, garbage fees, stuff. Okay? So be careful. Be careful with this. Okay, close of escrow. Escrow shall occur 30 days after acceptance on May 6th. Does that date look familiar?
Mm-hmm.
We already had that date up here somewhere else.
Closing date.
That's our closing date. There, where'd it go? May 6th. Okay? That's why they said we have to have all this information in on or before May 6th. Because right here it doesn't say closing date. Over here it clarifies what's so magical. Honey, what's so magical about May 6th? Ah, I get it. May 6th, the day we're going to close. Well, let's bust out the calendar. Oh, May 6th is a Wednesday. Lance didn't say we were going to close on a Wednesday. Lance said we were going to close on Friday because we were going to move over the weekend. If we close on May 6th, we got to get out on Thursday. We're not going to have any time. Who screwed that up? Who's the idiot who said we had 30 days from acceptance? Right? You guys fight with me over this all the time. Lance, I don't want to put a hard date in there because I don't know when the acceptance is going to be. Blah, 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 blah. Guys, I have closed thousands of real estate transactions. Okay? Trust me, putting in 30 days after acceptance is stupid. Pick a date. If your negotiations go on for an extended period of time, pick a new date, put it in an addendum, put it in a counteroffer, and say, we've been fooling around for 2 weeks going back and forth on this negotiation. 2 weeks ago, I wanted to close on May 6th. Are we getting close to accepting this? Here we are. Great. Let's put one more term in here. Escrow to close on May 17th. Everybody good with that? Break out your calendars. It's a Friday. Oh crud, but it's I don't know what anything special about that day. It's Memorial Day weekend. Is that a good day to close? I don't know. You know, let your buyer and seller and your lender. By the way, who else needs to be involved in this? Who needs to sign off on this close of escrow date? Probably more importantly than the buyer, and frankly, probably more importantly than the seller. Hey, Mr. and who's doing the loan? This Blue Point? Mr. and Mrs. Blue Point Mortgage. We sold a house this weekend. You're doing the loan for my buyer. Are you ready? Well, yeah, no problem. Well, we've got a contract now that says we're going to close on May 6th. Oh, well, I really wish you would have told me because, you know, right now appraisals are backed up. I don't even think I can get the appraisal done that quickly, and then we need 2 weeks after that. Lance, the earliest we can close is probably going to be May 15th, and that's pushing it. I'll just keep that piece of information to myself. Because I don't want to tell anybody that I screwed up. Especially the buyer. And God forbid I told a listing agent, because he already thinks I'm an idiot. So you know what, let's do this. Maybe we can get that appraisal done sooner. And maybe you can process things a little sooner. And let's shoot for May 6th. Blue Point, can you try? I'll do everything I can, but I'm telling you right now it's not going to happen. Why don't you just try? And in the meantime, I'm not going to tell anybody. Does that happen?
Yeah.
I know it's kind of funny. That happens all the time. I would suggest that happens in every single transaction that we do. It may not revolve around the scenario I just gave you. It revolves around something else. But I would suggest somebody is doing that in almost every transaction. Let's not tell them. And maybe you're doing it for good reasons. You know what, I think I'm going to have this resolved in about 3 or 4 days. I just don't want to get my buyer upset, because I'm pretty sure by Friday this is going to be cleaned up, and I'm doing it for a good reason. It's a minor issue. Don't want you to lose sleep over the weekend. I get it, but don't do that. Tell your buyer, hey, guess what, a problem came up today. Before you freak out, I'm pretty sure that we're going to have this fixed over the next 2 or 3 days. Hold your breath for a couple days, relax. I'm working on it, the lender's working on it. I'm going to get back to you as soon as I know, but no later than Thursday. I will call you, and I expect everything to be fine. By the way, just so you know, I'm going to call the other agent, and I'm going to let him know what's going on as well. Okay? Now, some people, oh, Lance, that's silly. You're causing all sorts of drama. Everybody's going to freak out. I would suggest it's just the opposite. Number one, it's the professional thing to do. It's the right thing to do. And then it also takes you off the hook, because what happens if that problem that you thought was minor and it didn't get resolved in 3 days? Because normally how these things go is, I had the best of intentions. It was supposed to be solved today. Now the guy told me he needs another 4 or 5 days to fix it. Oh boy, I should have called Johnny a few days ago and told him, but he assures me now that if I just give him 4 more days, he's going to get this cleaned up. So I didn't tell him earlier, so I guess let's just go for another 4 days. And you know what happens? 4 days. Now you're a week into the problem, and guess what happens on day 7? Oh hell, it's a lot bigger problem than I thought. Oh no, now I gotta call Johnny, and he's gonna ask me, when did I find out about the problem? And I'm gonna have to tell him I've known for a week. Or I'm gonna, of course, do what we all do. I'm gonna lie to him. Right? And God forbid I tell the other agent. Because the other agent's going to say, when did you find out about this? Oh, I've known about it for a week. Now that happens all the time, except normally it's a major issue, and instead of telling you within a couple of days, you get to find out about it when? When do we get to find out about it? We get to find out about it on May 4th. What? What? We're going to close escrow in 2 days. When did you find out about it? Oh man, I meant to tell you. I've known about this for 45 days. I really thought we were going to... Guys, it happens all the time. It is
And your
truly...
client will ask, when did you find out? I got asked
That's right.
that question just this morning.
Right.
And fortunately, I was able to say, I found out at 6:45 this morning.
Right. And I got to tell you, quite honestly, if you have a big problem, you need to disclose it immediately. I mean, even, well, I found out yesterday. You found it yesterday? Why didn't you call me yesterday? Well, to be honest with you, because it was late in the day, and I'm sorry. They'll be upset. You need an especially big problem, or a potentially big problem. The truth will set you free, guys. Truth will set you free. Okay, so again, enough about my closing date. So anyway, we're going to close here on May 5th. Buyer and seller shall deliver signed escrow instructions consistent with this agreement within 15 days of acceptance. This is old. This is an old set of contracts. Normally that's not the case. We normally want them sooner than that. Seller shall deliver possession and occupancy of the property no later than 3 days after close of escrow. Where did that come from? Came from the purchase agreement. So I'm going to make sure that's consistent. The property shall be vacant unless otherwise agreed in writing. Transfer and title possession shall not occur at the same... Did you get that? If transfer of title and possession do not occur at the same time, buyer and seller are advised to consult with their insurance advisors. Stop right there. Does that normally happen? Does normally transfer of title, which is the date we recorded, May 6th, and buyer's possession occur immediately?
No.
Not normally. On a vacant house it would. But if you got and we're getting into more of a traditional real estate market, less REOs, more traditional sellers, the norm is on a seller owner occupied property is that they would move out within 3 days of close of escrow. Is the buyer's insurance company okay with that? What happens if one day after close of escrow, the seller's moving his stuff out, still has half of his stuff in there, and they're coming back with another truckload in the morning, and then the house burns down? Buyer never even got to move in. Seller's still on the way out. Is the insurance policy covering that? We need to make sure they carry. Now again, most insurance companies, your traditional insurance companies, Farmers and State Farm, they understand that there's going to be a little bit of lag time. But what if you have an extended lag time? What if you have the seller is going to rent back for 30 days after close of escrow? You better make sure that's dealt with properly, not only in the contract, not only in the escrow instructions, but also in some sort of written rental agreement. And make sure your insurance carrier is aware of it. Which, by the way, if somebody gets sued, let's suppose the buyer and seller sue each other and you end up in court from one another, is the judge going to ask for a copy of the purchase contract or a copy of the escrow instructions? Contract.
Is that signed?
Purchase contract. Well, these are signed too, but these are not. This is not a contract. Just to be clear.
The contract governs a transaction.
Contract. This is just a set of instructions. This is almost like a memo to the third party. This is not a contract. Nowhere on here does it say that this is a contract between the buyer and seller. It may reference a contract between the buyer and seller, but this is not a contract between the buyer and seller. So that's why it's so important that we have our instructions, our contracts drafted. Okay, so close of escrow, we're going to transfer title, they need to consult with their insurance buyers, they need to enter into a written occupancy agreement if it's extended. Escrow instructions may include matters required to close these transactions, which are not covered by this agreement. Ooh, danger, danger. The omission from escrow instructions of any provisions into this agreement shall not constitute a waiver of that provision. Getting back, I didn't read that, but it gets back into my court thing. Let's suppose for a moment in the contract, the RPA, it says, what is it supposed to say? It says that the seller is going to pay for the home warranty. Okay? And let's suppose somewhere along the line that got missed in the escrow instructions. Not only did the seller not pay for it, the buyer didn't pay for it, there was no home, it just wasn't ordered. Nobody paid for the home warranty. Escrow closed. The omission from escrow instructions of any of the provisions in the agreement shall not constitute waiver of that provision. Does that mean that the seller is still not responsible? Now, hey, we closed escrow. Nobody caught it. I'm not paying for the home warranty now. No. Contract says you're paying for home warranty. You need to pay for home warranty. Yeah, but escrow's closed. I'm gone. Come get me. Does that happen? It does. Is it practical to sue the owner who just moved to Texas for $500 or $450? Who ends up paying for that? Agents. Cha-ching! Reach into the pocket. Pay up, sucker. Because we missed that. That should have been, this is why we read the escrow instruction. Oh, escrow's going to pay it. They missed it. Okay. I suggest you reach into your wallet. Depending on the relationship with your escrow officer, I don't know. You got to pay for those things. Okay, allocation of costs. Transfer fees. This comes straight out of the purchase agreement. Seller shall pay for county transfer tax. Title and escrow. Seller shall pay for owner's title insurance policy issued by. Buyer and seller shall pay 1/2 each of the escrow fee. Apparently that must have done what it said. Escrow holder shall be Merino escrow. Long, rest their souls. So that should be, now if that's not what the contract says, we got a problem. Other costs, seller should pay for. Again, these are coming straight out of the purchase contract. I'm not going to go through all of these, but make sure whatever you've put into the purchase contract is properly reflected in your escrow instructions. Pest control report, who's paying for it? Seller shall pay for work under Section 1. Buyer shall pay for Section 2. Is that what your is that what your contract says? Does it talk about a dollar amount in here anywhere, by the way? I don't see anywhere where it says a cap. All that says is that buyer's paying for one, excuse me, seller's paying for section 1, buyer's paying for section 2. If you don't know what section 1 and section 2 is, come to our termite disclosure, or termite report class in a couple weeks. We'll explain what that means. But the bigger problem, the way I see these escrow instructions, there's no dollar amount, there's no cap. They're paying for it. It's going to cost $10,000 to get all the section 1 work done. Who has just agreed to pay $10,000? Seller. Same thing with buy side. Terms and conditions of the pest control. Title investing. Within the time specified in paragraph 16A, this is the original purchase contract. The numbers have changed. This is a 7-year-old contract or escrow instruction, but again, it's the same. Referring to that paragraph, buyer shall provide a current. Let me rephrase that. Buyer shall be provided a current. Buyer's not providing it. Buyer is getting it. Receiving a current preliminary title report, which is only an offer to insure, not an actual policy. And they have an opportunity to review and approve that. Buyer shall, within the same time specified, original purchaser provide a written seller that items are reasonably disapproved. What that basically says is I get a prelim, and whatever time frame it says, normally in our contract says how many days do we have to give them a prelim? 7? 7 days. I think they've got 5 days to approve or disapprove. What would we disapprove? No one told me the property's in a homeowners association. That would be on the prelim. Nobody told me that there's special assessment taxes for an extra $2,000 a year. I'm disapproving. So disapproving basically means that I don't like these things, I'm canceling, time out, game over, give me my deposit back. Or time out, game not so over, what are you going to do to compensate me for these items that I've just discovered on the prelim? Keep in mind non-disclosed items on the prelim. If you disclose to them in advance, properties in a homeowners association, and if you disclose to them that there's an extra $2,000 in special assessment taxes, that would not be a valid reason for them to cancel. Well, let's just assume for a moment that something came up on the prelim that they didn't like. So they have to approve or disapprove. At close of escrow, buyer shall receive a grant deed, we talked about that earlier, conveying title to the property, or stock cooperative, lease, assignment, or certificate. Anybody sold anything with water stock? That is fairly common. There's several properties within our market area that when you buy the house, you get some water stock. Okay? Ukaipa, Marina Valley has it. There's all sorts of stuff all over San Bernardino and Highland has water stock. It's not normally worth a whole heck of a lot, but you own stock in the company that's providing water, and you get a dividend check for $9 a year or something like that. So anyway, you get that. Again, assuming that it has that. So you're going to get that. Title shall be subject to encumbrances, easements covered. Very repetitive. We've already gone through that. So that's what it's going to be subject to. However, title should not be subject to any liens against the property except for those specified in the agreement. We've already talked about those. Proration of property taxes. This is this is for the most part straight out of purchase contract. Escrow is instructed to prorate property taxes, homeowners association dues, yada, 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 yada. Okay? That's exactly what it should say in the contract. If you're not doing that, you need to make sure you clarify what you're not going to prorate. The boilerplate language in the let me just give a silly one, but it's a simple one to understand. Properties in a homeowners association, we're not going to prorate the homeowners association dues. The seller has paid the $100 for the homeowners association dues for the month of June or July, and we're going to close on July 15th. If we were to prorate that, because homeowners association dues are paid in advance, if we were to prorate that, the seller would get a credit for $50 for the $50 from July 15th to the end of the month. They paid $100. The buyer's going to get to use the second half of the month. They get $50 back. If we decide in writing not to prorate that, we need to put that in writing somewhere. Seller has paid the association dues for the month of July. Proration dues will not be prorated. So in other words, the seller paid them for the buyer for the month, for the 15 days or 10 days, however many days the buyer owned the property. So if you're not going to, which is not, that would be very unusual, but if you're not going to prorate, you need to make sure you put it in writing somewhere. Otherwise, you've got to deal with that. This is the FERPTA withholding. This comes straight out of the contract. This is another reason why we have to have the FERPTA form signed, or we have to have, with, by the way, the qualified substitute didn't exist when these escrow instructions were written. There could, in the new escrow instructions, you're going to have some language in here that talks about a qualified substitute. And again, the FERPTA form basically is covering the fact if the seller does not fill out the FERPTA form, the buyer may be subject to paying a 3% withholding tax to the state of California. And it's just a mess. Get the form signed, complies with the law, everybody's happy. Okay? And this is straight out of the contract. Closing form, closing funds rather. This is something that all agents need to have a conversation with their buyers. Okay? Each party acknowledges that the close of escrow is conditioned upon checks clearing. Funds to close must be in the form of cashier's check drawn at a bank with a clearinghouse in the state of California. It's important because if they got to clear it in Virginia, that takes time. Or wire transfer, which is the preferred method. You know, this is 2013. Anybody with a computer and a bank account today can wire funds from their home. You don't have to go down to the bank, fill out what we used to have to do. Oh, wire, God, that seems so mystical. I've got to go into the bank and I've got to fill out a form and I've got to have all the numbers and I don't understand it and my bank wants to charge me $5. And I'm afraid of it. Okay? Which is why we always did what? We did cashier's checks. We're still doing cashier's checks, but the balance is starting to shift. I bet you in another 5, certainly another 10 years, the thought of a cashier's check, the younger agents will say, I've heard about this thing called a cashier's check. What exactly does that mean? Nobody's going to be using cashier's checks. We're going to be wiring money directly from our bank account. It's simple. Ease safe. Okay? So at any rate, there's two things that you need to make clear to your buyer, because let's face it, there's still a good, I would say a majority of the buyers and sellers who are not comfortable wiring funds. There's still a lot of folks out there that, I don't want to do that, I want to write a check. Okay, fine. But you're not writing us a personal check. You are getting certified funds, cashier's check, not a money order. Money orders can have stop payments put on them. Money orders have problems. Certified cashier's check, drawn from a bank with a clearinghouse in the state of California. If you don't do that, oh, by the way, you're potentially going to delay our close of escrow. Well, I don't have, the only thing I can do is give you a personal check. Fine. Give me a personal check. Escrow will not close until that check has cleared the bank. How long is that going to take? I don't know. A few days, a week, maybe 10. I don't know. Depends on your bank, depends on, I don't know. All I can, okay, fine. Well, when are we going to close? We're going to close in 3 weeks. Give me the cashier's check, or give me the personal check today. No, I don't want to give it. I want to give it to you a couple days before. Then don't give me a personal check. Got to have good funds. This happens all the time. By the way, another thing, and this will bite you as well. It's very common for the initial deposit to be deposited into escrow in the form of a personal check. Very common. In this case, we have a $2,000 earnest money, which is not enough, by the way. We could talk about that, but we've got a $2,000 earnest money deposit. We're going to close in 30 days. Hey, give us a personal check made payable to Merino Escrow. Bam, 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 bam. Bam. No problem. Okay? Common. We have plenty of time for that check to clear. I cannot tell you how many times, 2, 3, 4 weeks, 2 days before close of escrow, upon cancellation of escrow, escrow informs me, oh,
EMD bounce.
that check bounced. Oh, when did it bounce? Oh, well, it actually bounced. Actually bounced about 3 weeks ago.
And you
But
just now
my
telling me?
my manager, you guys hold on 2 seconds. This is Lance. This is Lance. Hey. I actually wasn't, but I saw the caller ID, so I thought I'd pick up real quick. Hey, let me call you back in about an hour. Is that good? Okay, wait. Bye-bye. Sorry about that, I had a client on the line. Okay,
Norm would call a money call.
money call, baby, money call. Actually, that could be a really big deal for the entire office, so I
Yes.
just wanted to make sure that it is who I thought it was, and it was. Okay, so, and let's get certified funds. And if you do take a personal check for the initial opening earnest money deposit, not only do you want to get the receipt from escrow, but you want to, hopefully this will just be automatic and you're just dealing with a good quality escrow officer, because that's one of those things where you think you've got a good quality escrow officer and you get ready to close escrow and you find out, you guys got lazy on this one. You got sloppy on this one and you didn't follow up on those good funds, and now I got a problem and you've delayed my close of escrow. Okay? And that happens. And frankly, that can happen to the best escrow officer on the planet. So we want good funds. 1099 form. Basically proceeds, and again, we're now starting to get back into the world of sellers getting proceeds. But real estate transactions are taxable. Okay? Now there may not be tax due on every transaction, but that doesn't mean they're not subject to tax. So every time a real estate transaction closes escrow, guess who gets to find out about this? IRS, the regulatory tax agencies in the state and the Fed. Okay? So in this particular case, it's just telling the seller is that we're going to report to the IRS whatever your proceeds are. I know you told me this wasn't going to be taxable because I'm with them. Relax. I didn't say you'd have to pay tax, but we still report it. It goes onto the spreadsheet, and then they push the button and they say, oh, you don't owe anything. Or they push the button and they say, oh, you do owe something. So everything we do is taxable. You cannot hide a real estate transaction from the government. You cannot do it. Not going to happen. Especially if you're recording deeds. Because even if you don't use an escrow company, well, you're going to record a deed. The deed's going to have information on it. They're going to get that information. Okay, in the event either party requests cancellation of this escrow, by the way, this is all caps. Did you notice that? At any time, all parties are aware that this escrow will not be considered canceled, and no funds will be dispersed until escrow holder has received mutually signed cancellation instructions from both buyer and seller. Right?
Right.
Right. Clear as day. Nothing ambiguous about that. Doesn't matter who's right or wrong. Amendments. This agreement may not be amended, modified, or altered, or changed and respected whatsoever except by further agreement in writing. The amendment. We need an amendment to escrow. What are we going to amend? Appraisal came in low. We got to get the price down to $310. We're not going to close on May 5th. We need to extend to May 15th. Has to be done in writing by both parties. The buyer can just not call escrow and say the appraisal came in low, take it down to $300. Now the escrow can type that escrow instruction per the buyer's instruction, send it out for signature to the seller. Oh, I'm signing this. Okay, well then that's not in effect. By the way, you can order all the amendments you want. You can have escrow type amendments all day long, but until both parties sign those instructions, then they're not going to do anything. They're not going to do as instructed. Escrow will not do as instructed. Well, actually, they will do as instructed. They'll do as instructed in the original set of documents, but they won't change unless both parties change. Change of ownership. This talks about property taxes. This is another nice thing. Let's separate us from the rest. Let's be professionals here. This gives us an opportunity to meet for a second or third or 10th time with our buyer and seller and explain to them exactly what they're doing. And in this particular case, this gives us an opportunity to explain to my buyer that, remember when we sat down and we started looking at the property and I put that property profile in front of you? And remember you pointed out the property taxes and you said, oh, look at that, honey, the property taxes are only $1,500 a year. And you remember I said, no, wait a minute. That's what the property taxes are for the current owner. And remember I pointed out to you that your property taxes are going to be reassessed, and they're going to be assessed at whatever our purchase price is, approximately 1.25% of $360,000, whatever it is. Your property taxes are going to be there instead of over here. And then you remember we talked about it again in the purchase contract. And now we're talking about it again. Or let's suppose you never had any of those conversations. You didn't have the first or the second conversation with the buyer. Now you have an opportunity. And by the way, isn't it so much better to be a professional and go through this with your client in advance as opposed to having them ask you? And how embarrassing would it be? Hey, agent, I'm reading the escrow instructions over. What does this change of ownership thing mean? And what does it mean property will be reassessed upon change of ownership? This will affect the taxes paid. I don't understand what that means. And your response is, Lance! Lance! What does this mean? And I'm going to say, have you not watched one video? Have you not sat in one class? Have you not read this? That's another thing, frankly, that drives me mad. I don't want to insult the intelligence of anybody in our office or in our industry, but the reality is, most of these things, if you actually read what it says, you can figure it out. And this isn't the only place that this is mentioned. It's in the contract, it's going to be in the preliminary title report, it's in the escrow instructions, it's in your real estate book, I think it's in the principals book, it's in the practice book. I mean, it amazes me sometimes how some of these things kind of get lost. So at any rate, they're going to be reassessed. Now let's read it. Does this make sense to the layperson? A supplemental tax bill will be issued, which shall be paid as follows. A, for periods after close of escrow, by the buyer, or by finally acquiring party, by the final acquiring party, which is the buyer, if part of an exchange. And B, for periods prior to close of escrow by the seller, talking a little bit about prorations as well. Tax bills issued after close of escrow shall be handled directly between the buyer and seller. So which, by the way, that happens. Tax bills come in after close of escrows, things kind of slip through the crack a little bit. That sort of stuff happens all the time. So, I don't know if that's clear. It doesn't exactly say what I said. I get it. I can understand how a buyer could be confused by that. I didn't read it very well. I could read it 2 or 3 more times. It doesn't really say what I said originally. Property bill will be reassessed upon change of ownership. This talks about supplemental bills, final bills, tax bills that come in after close of escrow. This doesn't talk about reassessed. Is this property going to be reassessed?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Is it important for your buyer to understand that the property taxes are going to be based upon the purchase price? Yes. And it's important for you to explain that to them. Entire contract. I love this. Time is of the essence. This came straight out of the contract. Time is of the essence. It's restating what's in the contract. It basically is very simple. If it says you're supposed to do something in 10 days, do it. 7 days, do it. 15 days, do it. Close of escrow, do it. They're not target dates. Do what the contract says in a timely fashion. Preliminary change of ownership. We talked just a paragraph or 2 above this about you cannot get away from the government. You cannot get away from the government. A preliminary change of ownership. Buyer will hand you a completed preliminary change of ownership. Where is that going to go? It's going to go to the appropriate agencies. It says, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer now own this house. This is what they paid for it. This is based the taxes on it and yada, yada, yada. All that stuff has to be done. Property taxes, we covered that. Payoff of existing liens and or encumbrances. If there is a payoff, it's going to be handled in escrow. That's how we want it handled. It's one of the reasons we use an escrow company, is we want to make sure that the seller's existing liens, first trustee, second trustee, the silent second for the pool guy, the trustee for the brother-in-law loaned $10,000 who recorded it on a napkin. I want to make sure all that stuff gets paid and be handled through escrow. I want that to be handled through escrow. You sure as heck don't want any of that stuff handled outside of escrow. Parties understand in the event of closing of escrow is a special recording. Ooh, we love special recordings. The borrower's proceeds may not be dispersed until the following working day. Or commission checks for that matter. Special recording basically means All recordings are morning recordings. Anything that's not a morning recording, normally the afternoon recording, is considered special. Special recordings are wonderful things. They help us close escrows to make month end. They help us close an escrow on a Friday afternoon when we thought we might have otherwise had to wait till Monday. But what they're saying here is if we do that special recording, thank us, don't beat us up. Don't expect to find out at 5 o'clock, which is what happens so often. Special recording, how that process works, by the way, is literally, it is a manual process in many cases. The deed of trust is walked into the county recorder's office by the runner at ABC Title Company. They stand in line with a whole bunch of other people, with a whole bunch of other stacks of paper. They walk up there to the window and, please record these. I'm on the phone. Oh, wait a minute, hold on, let me pull this one out. I was told that this one, something happened. Escrow panicked at the end, title company pulled something, somebody freaked out, pulled that one out. I got my stack, I take my paperwork to the county window, I give it to them, they bam, 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 I pay the fee, and I walk back and say, okay, we recorded property 1, 2, 3, 6, and 10. What happened to the other ones? You told me not to record it. Or, oh my God, what happened to number 4? I go out to my, oh crap, number 4 fell underneath the seat of my car, title runner's car. Did that property close escrow that day? No.
Mhm.
It happens. It happens. Okay? There's so many people involved in the process. Now, at any rate, they get back, it goes to the process, so now that title company calls the escrow company, we got recording. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Seller calls, I want my money. Agent calls, I want my commission check. Escrow's like, come on, man. It's the last day of the month, it's 5:30. We closed 12 escrows today. It's not physically possible for us to stay. And even if I did do it, the earliest you could pick it up would be, 9, 10 o'clock tonight on a Friday. So they're telling you, cool your jets a little bit if we have these special recordings. Mail delivery, yada, yada, yada. Withholding talks about taxes. This is straight out of the property, or straight out of the contract. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. Same thing with that. Matter of fact, this is a little dated, a set of escrow instructions. So, but again, the tax withholding still applies. Even though I'm brushing by the withholding, if we don't fill out the FERPTA, seller is subject to withholding tax. Okay, that's exactly what this is all talking about. What else do we got here? We're getting close to the end. Occupancy. Buyer does intend to occupy the property as buyer's primary residence. Where did that come from? Came from the RPA. Transfer disclosure statement. This particular set of escrow instructions has chosen to put this information in here. We're providing these documents, buyer and seller initial. A lot of boilerplate stuff. Disclosures. Further contract. Seller has agreed to provide these disclosures to the buyer. Pretty straightforward. Fixtures. Per the contract. The property has fixtures as stated in the contract. The stove, the pool equipment, whatever it happens to be. Buyer's investigation of the property. Straight from the contract. Buyer has the ability to inspect the property. Okay? Pretty straightforward. Final walkthrough verification. That's our walkthrough form. Per the contract. In this particular case, the buyer had 5 days prior to close. Per the contract. Liquidated damages. Was it initialed in the contract? If it's initialed in the contract, escrow instructions want you to initial it here. Arbitration mediation. Was it initialed in the contract? If it was, you want it initialed here. Attorney's fees. Does that look like something you'd find in the contract? Sure is. Time is of the essence. Again, from the contract. Agency. We're going to confirm who are the agency relationships within this particular company. Listed agents, Coldwell Banker Pioneer, representing the seller exclusively. Selling agents, West Point Realtors, representing the buyer exclusively. Where did that come from? Contract. These escrow instructions are not intended to supersede the real estate purchase contract. Ta-da! If we end up in court, what goes in front of the judge?
Contract.
Contract. All right. So here we go. General provisions. I'm not going to go through any of these. This particular set of escrow instructions, I think, has 2 or 3 pages of general provisions. Every set of escrow, this is literally the fine print. This is all of the law that governs what escrow can and cannot do. I am not telling you not to read this. What I am telling you is this is boilerplate general provisions. You're going to find this in every set of escrow instructions. You do need to become familiar with it because on occasion you're going to have buyers that are going to ask you questions about item number 10. Okay? Having said that, none of this is found in the contract per se. It might reference back to the contract, but anything under the general provisions sections or the general instructions sections are just kind of it's almost like the disclosure page for the escrow company. Okay, escrow company not allowed to give legal advice. They're just like us. They're not legal folks. They're not, and frankly, they're not real estate people. Believe it or not, a lot of escrow companies, they know very little about real estate. They're really good at title stuff, how the whole title process works. Very few escrow companies know very little about the loan process. They're not loan officers, okay? They're escrow officers. So, okay, so we've got, okay, buyer and seller to sign. I think we're pretty much done with, Exhibit A. This was referred to, I think, back on page 1 or 2. This is the legal description. Yeah, you should. You know, I know it sounds like we're getting into the tall grass here, but you really probably should kind of verify, do we have the right one? It's important. God forbid you attach the wrong legal description to the grant deed. You got a problem. It happened recently, just within the last 6 months, 12 months, at Lakeview Centennial Homeowners Association. The buyer thought they were buying, I don't remember the exact address, 12221 Unit D as in David. At close of escrow, guess what they got? Unit 12221 A as in Apple. They go over there, they're marching up the stairs, ready to go into their D unit. Wait a minute. We go downstairs, A unit. Well, guess what? Somebody's in the A unit. Okay, who's in the A unit? The owner of the A unit. Title messed up. Wrong legal description. Still working it out. Not fun. Thank God it wasn't my deal. Commission instruction. This is always nice.
All right.
Okay, hey, let's get paid. Well, I gotta tell you, I train my escrow officers. I want the commission instructions to be on the top. Okay? I don't want to have to wait till the end. So anyway, so here's our escrow instructions, our commission instructions. Coldwell Banker Pioneer was getting paid X. West Point Realtors is getting paid X. 3%, 72, 72, 14, 4. Pretty straightforward. I will tell you, there is a new phenomenon going on which I don't like. The tradition for my entire real estate career has been that both agencies involved in the transaction have their commission posted on the same commission instruction. I don't care whether the dollar amounts are the same, but hey, we're getting X, you're getting Y, this is what it is. As of late, you're noticing commission will only have one company, your company, and it won't tell you what West Point's getting. That's happening a lot because maybe West Point is the listing agent and they're taking 4% and they offer 2 to you and they don't want to tell you. Now the reality is, if that's what they want to do and they've said you're getting 2% and you agreed to 2% and that's what you're getting, then you really don't have a bitch. If you've agreed to take 2% and then you find out after the fact that they were taking 4%, you might not feel too good about it, but you don't really have too much to gripe about. But that might be the type of thing that you want to keep in the back of your head next time. Do I want to do business with Edgar at this company? Because I think he kind of shafted me a little bit. You know, so keep that in mind. But it's a pretty standard set of commission instructions. Which, by the way, those do need to be signed by an authorized representative, normally the broker or the manager in the office. Okay, so we've taken about an hour and a half. We've gone through what is, for the most part, a traditional set of escrow instructions. Okay? I'm going to show you a second set of escrow instructions. What you're going to notice, these escrow instructions are a little bit different. This is an escrow acceptance letter. And what are they accepting? They're accepting the contract. So let's go through it real quick. Page 1, Dear Glover. I'm assuming that's probably the buyer or the seller. I think that's probably the buyer. Okay, Dear Glover, this letter is to confirm that an escrow has been opened with Chicago Title, which, by the way, that's also an escrow company, under the above referenced escrow number for the purchase of the property known as 9 Bark Marine Valley, yada, yada, yada. Enclosed, please find escrow holder's signed copy of page 8 of residential purchase agreement and joint escrow instructions. Why are they sending the signed copy of page 8? Because on page 8 of the RPA, there's a section for escrow to sign, and what does it say? It says acceptance. Escrow is accepting the 8-page RPA as the escrow instructions. So the letter says, escrow acceptance letter, referencing page 8, and the escrow holder has signed it. They're returning it into you, and they're basically saying we're good to go. The escrow instructions are dated January 4th of 2005. What else is dated January 4th of 2005?
Contract.
Contract, thank you very much. Date of acceptance was on page 7, paragraph blah, 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 was January 14th. Date of close of escrow, is on or before February 18th, 2005. That's what the contract should say. Confirmation of purchase price, on page 1, paragraph $310,000. Escrow holder's general provisions, page 7, paragraph 28. Take a look at those. Approval of the legal description, clarification of instructions. Okay? And we've got enclosures. What am I enclosing? Please complete and sign return, which, by the way, the other escrow instructions that we just finished had a copy of a statement of information on there. I don't know why I cut it off, but statement of information, who I am, where have I lived for the last 10 years, where have I worked for the last 10 years, am I married, have I been divorced, who, what, where, when, and why. Buyer's vested information, preliminary change of ownership, property disclosure report. In this particular case, they'll do it at 1031. Please sign the tax withholding notice. Please retain for your files receipt for deposit. That's the money for the escrow. This is the buyer. Important buyer's information. Thank you for choosing Chicago Title. Got it? We had an 11-page or 12-page escrow instructions the first time. Now we have a 2-page letter. Then what do we go to? General provisions. Okay? This is becoming more of the standard. It's just a 2-page acceptance. We accept your escrow, or excuse me, we accept your purchase agreement. Now, if your purchase agreement is drafted poorly, number one, your escrow company will probably not accept it because they're going to, I don't know what you're doing. And if they do accept it, are you in for trouble? Absolutely. Okay, so here we've got our general provisions. In fact, let me just buzz through this a little bit different. General provision, general provision, general provision. This talks about our exchange. Got that. There's our commission instruction. Okay, we got that. Now what do we got? There's our contract. Ta-da. Here's the escrow acceptance portion, by the way. This is where they need to accept. So that's it. So, you've got 2 different versions of the same set of escrow instructions. One of them basically completely redrafts the entire set of escrow contract. And by the way, did they on the first set of escrow instructions, did they attach a copy of the purchase contract? No. The second one, you get a 2-page letter. It says we accept it. Here's a couple of minor things for clarification: price, close of escrow date, the buyer's name. Here's a statement of information, and here's attached our escrow instructions on the contract. Okay. Honestly, I prefer the second set that I showed you, if the contract is drafted properly. As long as the contract is drafted properly, you're in good shape. Okay? We do a hybrid, by the way. Our escrow instructions with Town & Country are probably in between the first set and the second set. We do accept the RPA as the escrow instructions, but if you're using Summer gets a little bit more granular. It hits the big bullet points. Boom, 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 boom. So instead of getting a 2-page acceptance letter, you're probably going to get a 3 or 4-page acceptance letter. Okay, I'm just throwing this up just for giggles. It's 2:30. We'll be done here in about 10-15 minutes, unless you guys have a question. This is just a closing statement. It's not part of the escrow instructions, by the way. This is what we're looking for. This is payday. The only good escrow is a closed escrow. So the only reason I bring this up in the escrow class is these are uniform. This is our, what you, if you hear the reference a lot, HUD 1, this is a HUD 1. Where does it get that name? HUD 1. That's what it's called. It's a government form. Anybody ever bought a car before? What happens when you go buy a car? What do you get? You get that one-page contract that's 4 feet long. Why do they use a one-page contract that's 4 pages long? Because that's what the law says. The law says you have to have it all on one sheet. Everybody uses the exact same one. If you go buy a car from the Ford dealer, you get that form. If you go buy it from CarMax, you get the exact same form. Okay? Same thing when it comes to a real estate closing statement. HUD 1. Okay? So what do you have here? And they're all laid out the same. They may look a little differently, but they're basically exactly the same. All the information is the same. What kind of financing are we doing? What's the file number? Mortgage insurance company, when it was printed, who's the borrower, who's the seller, who's the lender, what's the name of the property, who's the settlement. By the way, settlement agent is who? Escrow. Settlement agent is the name of the escrow. Now, to be confused on this one, it says Chicago Title, but Chicago Title is also the escrow company, which is very common. Every title company, by the way, has their own escrow company. Okay? And there's some advantages to that. Not that I want to discourage you from using Summer Town and Country, but there are some significant advantages to having your title company and your escrow company be the same company. Okay? We'll talk about that at a later date. But at any rate, the settlement company is the escrow company that handled it, which again in this case is Chicago Title. We closed escrow on March 11th. And again, then it goes through and it gives you a summary of borrower's transactions, cost, buyer, seller's transaction, seller. What's the price? Well, the price is $310. Who's paying for what? Settlement charges to the buyer, $800. Those are going to be defined on another page. Skip down, skip down, skip down, skip down, skip down. Gross amount due from the borrower, $310,000 plus $800. Why does it have the extra $800? Because there's some sort of cost associated. That $800, I don't know what it is. We're going to find out in a minute. So you got to be able to explain this to your buyer. Why? I thought the price was $310. Why does it say $310, $800? Okay. What's the gross amount due to the seller? Well, the purchase price, $310. What's our deposit? $2,000. Nothing over here. Principal amount of new loans. Okay. $243,000. That's what the buyer is getting a new loan. Now, when you start so far we've been reading across, it kind of works. Well, you got to be careful when you read across here because this line and this line don't really have any connection to one another. Okay? Settlement charges to the seller. The seller has total charges of $240,579. That includes paying off of mortgages, first trustee, whatever it happens to be. Okay? $240,000 in costs. Loans taken over subject to, there are none. A new loan from the Long Beach Mortgage Company, $62,000. This was the proverbial 80-20 loan. Remember those? First trustee for $243,000, second trustee for $62,000. It looks like the seller had additional loan over here on this particular one, had to pay off another $69,000 to Washington Mutual Bank. Okay? So let's come on down here a little bit. What else have we got? Taxes. $302 with the taxes. And we have some adjustments of $302 for taxes. Okay? One's a credit, one's a debit. Okay? So total funds paid by the borrower, total proceeds from the seller. This is what we got. Total cash from the borrower. In this particular case, the borrower got a refund, $1,500. Because they put in more money than they needed. If you're representing the buyer at a close of escrow, 100% of the time, 100% of the time, you will get the closing statement from the buyer and a refund check. The amount of the refund check will probably be no less than $200 or $300. That's pretty squeaky. In other words, the escrow officer only had a $200 or $300 buffer to get that deal closed. Sometimes it's a lot. Sometimes it's $1,500 to $3,000. If you're getting large refund checks for your buyer at close of escrow, you might think that that's a good thing, because then your buyer's like, hey, guess what? You just, oh, by the way, you gave us too much money. Here's $3,000 back. I would suggest your escrow officer did something wrong. Okay? Especially, you got to remember, what happens if you got a buyer that's really skinny on the funds? You don't want your escrow officer asking your buyer generally to bring in $3,000 or $4,000 more than what they need. A $500, $600 buffer is normally acceptable. In this particular case, is the seller getting anything? Nope. They got squadoosh. This was probably a short sale, best I could tell. And this second trust deed up here, they got $69,000, but maybe their loan was for more. I don't know. You have to go through and dig deeper. Okay, here's our page 2. Now this breaks down. This breaks down. Page 2 breaks down page 1. Have you guys ever looked at one of these? Good, because good. You need to look at these. Okay. Page 2 is a breakdown of page 1. Now again, settlement charges, you got buyer, seller side. And by the way, depending upon who you're representing, you don't always get to see the other side. The reason we get to see both sides, we must have represented both parties on this. But it's not uncommon if you represent the seller, you only get to see the seller side, you don't get to see the buyer side, and vice versa.
I think they used to let us see both, because Remax is the other side on that.
Okay. Well, yeah, but I'm special because with Patty, as my escrow officer, she gives me
That's
everything.
true, she used
I
to
get
do
it all.
specials for you.
Okay, so anyway, we got a $310,000 purchase price, a 6% commission. Listing broker was us, $9,300, 3% for the Remax champions, $9,300. So here's our commissions. That's $18,600. Who pays for the commission?
Seller.
Seller's funds. What do we got going here? Loan origination fee, Dana Capital, $2,400. Who got to pay for that? Loan origination fee is a loan fee for the buyer. Buyer was responsible for that. We got $500 on here. Processing fee to Dana Capital. That's a loan fee. I'd like to refer to that as a garbage fee. It's $500. Who paid for that?
Buyer.
Buyer. Premium yield adjustment.
Garbage fee.
Is that legal, broker application fee?
Sure. Why not?
I
At
get
any
these
rate, they had
Kinds of fees.
$2,480, and they just said, great, we're gonna $1,100, $400, $275, $500. So what do they charge? Application fee, underwriting fee, additional items payable in connection with the loan.
Pen and pencils.
Do you like that? I like to call these garbage fees. That's exactly what they are. These are garbage fees. And that's, it is what it is. Items required by lender to be paid in advance. Interest on their loan. $400. Which looks like, actually looks like a credit. Might have given them a credit depending on when they closed. They had to pay 1 year of insurance for Allstate. This is almost 10 years ago. Cheap insurance, $700. Courier fee. Check that out. Broker courier fee to Dana Capital, $400.
$100.
Ooh.
You go by helicopter?
If I'm representing the buyer, do I want to, let's put it this way. I'm representing the buyer. I referred my buyer to Dana Capital. Do I want to explain this to them? By the way, where are these fees? All of these fees should be on the estimated the good faith, right? I don't want to explain these now. If I told the buyer, Johnny, I told you not to use these guys. I told you they were no good. Look what they just did. They just soaked you for thousands of dollars here in unnecessary junk. Are you just visiting, or you came in hot, man? I thought you had some news to report.
I
So-
learned the best.
So at any rate, I'm credit to buyer. Now, okay, so wait a minute. Now, wait a minute. Maybe things aren't all as bad as they thought. They got a $2,100 credit. I don't know what that's for. You'd have to go through and see. They said, hey, we're going to shaft you over here, but don't feel too bad because we're going to give it back to you over here and make you feel good. That way, if I do that, I really got you for $4,000 or $5,000. But if I tell you I'm giving you $2,100 back, you're not going to bitch about the $400 credit.
Who cares? Right?
You guys have to use reputable lenders, and that's all. I mean, you cannot stress how important that is. Hazard insurance. $155. Now they're doing reserves on this, so this must have been an impounded loan. So they wanted to impound hazard insurance. They impounded 2 months worth of hazard insurance at $77 each, $77.50 for $155. Is that a recurring closing cost?
Yeah.
It's a recurring closing cost. So we were talking about earlier. This is a closing cost. Are they going to have hazard insurance goes on, right? It's recurring. There's a recurring closing cost. If you're asking the seller to pay for some recurring closing costs, could they apply some of that to this?
Yes.
Yes, they could. What do we got over here? Property taxes. They want 7 months of property taxes at $322 a month, so that's $2,260. Is that a recurring closing cost?
Yes.
Could the seller pay that, assuming you asked him to? Yeah. So that's where that would go. Aggregate accounting adjustment. What the hell is that? Don't ask, I have no idea.
Hey, it's a credit.
Someone was trying to balance the file and they were off by $12.96 and they said, aggregate accounting adjustment. Don't know. Mistake. Something got screwed up.
That's how I
And-
balance my checkbook.
There you go. Okay, so,
It's good to go.
okay, here's your title charges, title and escrow charges. So you've got your settlement closing fee. Now, this is a bad example of a closing statement. When you see title charges and you see settlement fee and you see Chicago title, who do you think this is? Title company. These are not title fees. This is escrow fee. Okay, just pretend that this says Chicago Title Escrow Company. Okay. In this case, the buyer and seller split it. Which is very common, right? Buyer and seller to pay 50-50, right? $758 to the seller charges, $758 to the buyer charges, vice versa. Doc prep. Chicago Title charged $50 to the seller. Remember, the right side is the seller charges. What's that for?
Preparing the docs.
Hmm?
Preparing the docs.
What docs? What did they do? Probably not.
Loan docs.
Buyers, sellers don't normally pay to have loan docs prepared. It's probably preparing a grant deed or something like that. That would normally, there's not a lot of documents that the title company, or excuse me, the escrow company would prepare on behalf of the seller. There could be like some 1031 exchange documents, but it's probably a grant deed, could be a reconveyance fee or something like that. These are the type of things that you need to have a relationship with your escrow company and make sure that they're not ripping you off, because they can very easily pad things and rip you off. That again is a garbage fee. If I had called my escrow officer at the time and said, take that off. Oh, come on, man, we get a little spiff over here for drawing grant deeds. I know, but my seller ain't paying your spiff. Which why, you don't want to know where your escrow officers make most of their money? Notary.
Yeah.
Notary. Be careful with that too. Don't let your escrow officers charge your clients loads of money for notary fees. Now it's different if you have your escrow officer, hey, can you help me out? I need you to drive to Los Angeles and get these loan documents signed for me to close in time. Well, that's going to cost you a couple $100. Okay, and that, by the way, that does not normally show up on the hub. It could. Let's go back to these courier fees. We kind of beat up a little bit on this mortgage company. In fairness to them, that could have been completely legitimate. That could have been courier / notary / loan doc signing fee. The husband was in LA, and then the courier / notary / escrow officer maybe drove to Santa Barbara to meet the wife. I would want some more explanation on that, but could be legit, could be had. Where did we go? Title insurance. Again, you got to remember in the contract. Buyers get lost on this a lot. In the contract, the box says sellers shall pay for title insurance, property, yada 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 yada. Box is checked. That's the $1,300. But then there's a little thing in parentheses that says buyer shall pay for lender's policy. Buyers look at this all the time. Why? Oh, wait a minute. I've got the contract in front of me, and it says sellers paying for title insurance policy. You're correct. Look at the little paragraph below with little parentheses and little brackets on it. It says buyers paying for the Alta policy. Everybody know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Let me pull one up in front of you real quick. seller shall pay for owner's title insurance policy, right? Bracketed. I don't have any, I've asked this question for 20 years. Why is this bracketed? Why? I just don't get it. Buyer shall pay for any title insurance policy issuing the lender. Why don't we just put a box right here and check it? Say buyers to pay for that. That's just how it is. Which, by the way, is that negotiable?
Yeah.
No.
Yes. It's completely negotiable. Could you
Yeah,
ask
it's
the
negotiable.
seller to pay for the buyer's title? Could you ask the seller to pay for this $415?
Yeah,
Of course you could. By the way, is that a recurring or a non-recurring closing cost?
no.
It's a non-recurring closing cost. I want seller to pay $415 for buyer's non-recurring closing costs, specifically the title insurance. I have so much heartburn. It's just sticks in my craw why that contract is read that way for my entire real estate career. I don't get it. And the reason it sticks in my craw is because I've had more than one buyer question this. And it kind of makes sense. I'm like, don't you remember I told you right here? Oh yeah, okay, I remember.
There should be 2 boxes in there, right? Buyer or
Ah,
seller.
it should be. It's not. I cannot. I'm just. My head's gonna explode. I've thought that for so many years. I just can't believe it. Okay, lender's coverage. This, by the way, this breaks down this. Okay. Why does that not match? 1323, 1323, 371, 415.
That was at $12, wasn't it? No.
That's a mistake.
Yeah.
Something's wrong there.
$12.
I don't know. Oh, we got an overnight fee to Chicago title of $1232. Does that jive with that other fee that was out of bounds?
That one that was,
$1296. Boy, Patty must have been asleep at the switch. And
Well-
the listing agent on this.
I was gonna say, in
Probably
all
didn't-
fairness to Patty,
probably
I'm
didn't
seeing
re-
a reviewed stamp.
yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
Anyway, these are mistakes, guys. These are mistakes. That should match with that. No wonder this file's out of bounds. Loan tie-in fee, garbage fee, $175 payable to escrow. Now this is the thing. You send your buyers into the escrow company. What is a loan tie-in fee? Garbage. It's set down, we signed the loan docs, we tied in the loan, baby. Tied that sucker in, man. Put a nice little bow on it.
Merry Christmas.
I spent an hour, which by the way, in fairness to the escrow officers, have you ever gone with your buyers, sat down with them when they're signing loan documents? I got to tell you, sometimes that's a chore. Sometimes that's a multiple hour process. Okay, sometimes it's a 5-minute process, which kind of begs the question: does anybody bother to read their loan documents? No, of course they don't. But a loan tie-in fee, this is a garbage fee, which in escrow companies, they charge all the time. In this case, they charge $175 to tie in their loan. Now again, let's suppose you're representing the buyer and you get a question. Hey, Michael, what did I pay? 170. What is a loan tie-in fee? What are you going to say? I'll tell you what I say. It's a garbage fee. Escrow picked up another $175 for sitting down, signing your loan documents, sending them over to the lender, coordinating with title, and tying the package together. Bullshit is what it is. But it's $100. This is why I have a big problem, especially when buyers and sellers, or agents rather, start griping about escrow fees. This is a relatively inexpensive escrow fee for a $300,000 purchase price. But when you start to get $50 for this and $175 for this and all the rest, that sort of stuff, well, that's no longer. Well, what is that? This up here. Let's just call it $1,500, right? Well, if I add this and this, that's $225. That is 15% increase, right? $225 is about 15% above $1,500. So, okay, well, that's a lot of money. It doesn't sound like a lot, but your escrow fees are actually 15% higher than what you advertised they were. And then people just, they just roll over and they take it. They pay the fees. Okay, so where are we? Almost done. We'll be out of here in 5 minutes or less. Okay, now we've got our recording fees. Recording fees, $103. It's documentary transfer taxes of $341. That's on line 1202. Recording fees, $103. I don't know. Could have been to record the deed of trust. I'd probably like an explanation of that. It probably went in the pocket of the title or the escrow company. Just sit on a receipt, man. $103. Taxes to Commonwealth, second half, that's very common. Commonwealth title ended up paying off the taxes on this. $777. Additional stuff. Disclosure resource or disclosure source, that's the NHD, $60. A due termite, $100 for a termite inspection. Seller pays buyer. It's all so clear. It's all so clear. Seller paid buyer's closing costs. We're going to charge the seller, let's just call it $9,200. We're going to credit the buyer $9,200. Remember earlier when I sat down and we were talking about, I'm writing this offer and we're negotiating the offer and we're trying to determine if we can get the seller to pay some closing costs on the benefit for the buyer. That's exactly what happened here. The seller paid closing costs to the benefit of the buyer. The benefit being the key word. Now I call my lender. Let's pretend Stephen's our lender. Stephen, is it in my buyer's best interest to write this offer for $300,000 and have the seller pay $9,200 in closing costs? Stephen says, yes, it is. Because I'm going to get him a little better interest rate. I'm going to save him a little bit of money. So, what was the purchase price on this again?
300.
$310. Okay. I'm not much of a math wizard, but it's pretty damn close to 3%. Right? 3% of the purchase price. So now when I sit back, and we were kind of beating up on some of these fees. Keep in mind, I've got $9,200. Well, $2,500 to Stephen, $500 to Stephen, $275 to Stephen, $400 to Stephen. What was this one? Additional items payable in connection with the loan. $1,000 from Stephen, $9,200. That's just, give it to me, okay? Now, some of that money did go to some items that we already discussed, recurring and non-recurring. So it could have gone to pay for this and this and this and this and this and this and this. So there certainly was some benefit to the buyer. And let's, in fairness, we're beating up the lender, but in fairness, let's just, let's suppose that all of those fees were legitimate. They bought down their interest rate, they got a good loan, and all the rest of that sort of stuff. So you have all these closing costs. What do we have in here? Oh, there was a per diem. We charged charged the buyer, credit the seller. This property closed 21 days late. By the way, don't go into escrow with me and close late. I'm a jerk. $100 a day. We charged the buyer $2,100, which was credited to the buyer, from the seller, charged to the buyer, credited to the seller. We got $9,100 anyway. Didn't seem like that big of a deal. Didn't seem like that much of a penalty, did it? So what did the buyer actually have to come up with at close of escrow? $800. When you washed it all out, the buyer came up with an extra $800, which is why, come back here,
What was that? 310,800.
310,800. There you go. So when you look at total charges to buyer, almost there. All of that stuff that we just went through on page 2, the loan fees, the title, the escrow, blah, blah, the Dana, da, 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 Buyer had to pay $800. Seller basically absorbed all the rest of it. All of those charges that the seller had, the 240, was on the other side of that spreadsheet. So let's take a look at what's on the other side. Down. Commissions, 18.6. All that good stuff. Oops. Check. Bring this up here. Seller's proceeds to Keys Capital, 211. First trustee. Okay. Those are all of their closing costs. So they had $240,000. I'm still not sure where that $60,000 tied in. Maybe we'll find that out now. Okay, so what else have we got here? We've got buyers and sellers. Here we go. Get some additional charges. Oh, this is just a supplemental page. This has to do with all the special assessment taxes and all that. Here we go. And we had, they're calling this a first mortgage. This is not possible to be a first mortgage because we already had another mortgage on there, right? So they had interest and yada yada yada. $69,000. This was a short sale. Seller walked away with nothing. So if you go back to I'm on page 4, right? Page down. Yeah. So if you go back here,
05, and it was a short sale?
no, man, taking money out of the property left, right, and sideways. You kidding me? So if you come back here, this kind of tells you that. By the way, nobody looks at any of this stuff. Seller bought for $310,000. We're getting a refund check for this. The seller sold. They're getting nothing. Cash to or from seller, 0. Nada. Zippo. Had to be short. Got it? Can you explain it to your client? If you can, mission accomplished. All right, guys. Any questions? Yes.
Copy of this goes in the sky slope? When
Yes.
we get it?
This is the HUD
Yeah.
one. I think this guy's slope, we call it the settlement statement, closing statement.
Now,
I think it's HUD 1.
in regards to a new home?
Yep.
We have to request that from the builder, being the
The
seller?
HUD, this
Yes.
comes from escrow.
And on Sky
Who's
Slope.
doing your escrow?
Well, it's being handled through the new home builder.
Still
It's
has
a
to be
whole
an
grant-
escrow.
Okay.
They're
I gotta
just
find
gonna-
out.
Even though the new home, when you're selling new homes, they tend to, they're like dictators, they just kind of run the whole show.
Right.
There still has to be a third-party neutral escrow company involved. It may be owned by the builder, it may be builder's escrow company. But, yeah, by the way, getting a estimated HUD 1, not only is it best practice, it's common practice, you always get an estimated, and it'll tell your buyer and seller what escrow estimates them to need. So if you're gonna close escrow, 2 days from now, or 2 months from now, you can call escrow and say, hey, I'd like to get an estimated HUD 1, or estimated closing statement, estimated settlement statement, it's all the same thing.
Okay.
They will estimate what the cost and charges will be based upon whatever closing date there is, and they'll zip it over to you, and instead of saying final, it'll say estimate.
Put that in the sky slope, then later on I can get the final.
Well, you don't want to put the estimate in Sky Slope.
Oh, okay.
Well, let me rephrase that. You can, let's
You
go
could
on.
just simply leave it in your document section attached to that file in Sky Slope.
Exactly. Whose computer is this?
Okay.
Good Lord.
But your final is
Like that.
what you get from escrow after closing,
Okay.
and you'll upload it to this.
Okay.
You got all that?
Lance, now I shouldn't assume that they're just gonna send it to me, right? I mean, I
Well,
should
you're going to get,
stay on top of
well,
that.
first of all, no. You should never assume that you're going to get anything like
Yeah.
that. Having said that, when you, at close of escrow, I mean, it's the law. I mean, they have to give you a settlement statement. They have to give you that HUD 1. But just call them up. Say, I need an estimated HUD 1. They may say, why? What do you need it for? I want to sit down with my client. Make
Okay.
sure we got closing funds. I'm doing my job. Don't ask why. You work for me. Give me my closing, or give me my estimated closing statement. But they won't do that. They get that request all the time. That's a very common request. There's nothing unusual about asking for an estimated. It doesn't matter who you're representing, buyer or seller. And quite honestly, it's if you're representing the buyer, depending upon where you are in the transaction, the escrow may struggle with that. Because they may say, guess I don't have all the charges from the buyer's lender. I don't know what the loan fees are. Okay, well then you say, would you please call them up and get them? And they may say, well, I called them up and the lender's not quite sure. call your lender up and say, how come you're not quite sure what my loan fees are with my buyer? Give me the loan fees, I've got an estimate, I've got a good faith estimate. You need to get this information over to escrow. I want an estimated HUD-1. I want to know. It's best practice because you're going to sit down and what transaction are you doing? What's the address?
I'd have to get it. I don't remember what it is.
Is it in?
It's in Lake Elsinore. There it is, Sorrel Lane, 35177. Yeah.
So yeah, you definitely want to get it. You want to review it. You want to make sure you don't have any surprises. And then when you go, you're not going to put it on the checklist because you don't want it to go. What you want to go here is the HUD-1 final closing statement. So when you load it into the document center, don't put it here because that's where the final one goes.
Okay.
I don't know if you have anything else loaded in here. It looks like you got a couple of things. Just go ahead and load it. It'll show up in documents. Name it as estimated HUD-1 July 10th or whatever the date it is. And just keep it right here. And just estimated HUD,
Okay.
July 10th. Leave it in there. That is, again, I don't want to turn this into a skyscope class, but
Right,
I'm
right.
kind of doing this for Johnny's benefit more than anything else. This is the equivalent to just your file. Just stick it in the file. It's not on the checklist because it's not the final one. And frankly, if you get another one, revised estimated HUD-1, August 1st, something changed. Final estimated, that's your closing statement. When you get it all said and done, when you get the final, then attach it to the checklist under the final closing statement. Which is always, I don't know if it's always the last thing to go on into SkySlope, but if it's not the last thing, it's damn close to the last thing. I mean, you potentially could have closed the escrow and maybe you're still waiting, God forbid you're waiting on any of these things, but maybe you're waiting on something else. But in theory, it's the last thing that you load into SkySlope.
If somebody's doing this, does that automatically get put in there?
Not in SkySlope. She doesn't have access to SkySlope. You guys-
Sends it to you. though.
There's some
think,
stuff through escrow that automatically goes in.
I think maybe.
If you're telling her to email it, if you tell Summer, email anything I have to do, let's just take Robert's file for example. Email anything to me at stephenmeyer.com and CC Sorrel Lane 357 SkySlope. Anything she sends you goes straight into SkySlope in addition.
But does not attach to your checklist.
Correct. It goes straight into the document set.